growth. Could it be possible to accelerate your development, to accelerate your progress, to accelerate your career even? I'm here with my good friend Laurens Bonnema. There he is.
Hi there.
All right, so it's a handsome contest this week, is it? We've both got our backgrounds going. And let me just invite you onto the stage, as it were, here on Instagram. Hello around the world, everyone, from Instagram to YouTube, wherever you may be. It's a good morning. We lost our baseball game last night, but, you can't win them all. It was a tough loss. We were ahead 7-0, and then ended up getting, I don't even want to talk about the final score. And this is not me. This is my son, so at least I can pretend it's nothing to do with me, although I am the coach. So anyway, I wanted to talk about this subject. Laurens, how are you, by the way?
I'm doing great. Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm on a 2-week holiday even. So
Ooh,
nice.
What are you going to do with that 2 weeks?
Mostly drawing because
Good.
I want to, but also because I need to get some drawing done quite badly, desperately. So it's sometimes feels like work, but it's the fun part of it.
The fun part of work. Good, good. Let's get after this topic really quickly. I think that it's important to remember, because there's so much information available to us digitally, that the best way to learn is to do. Now, that sounds intuitive and may even sound repetitive from a previous, we've talked about discarding or not leaning on book learning so much, but I really want to talk about rehearsal and practice as an accelerator, because I'm trying to deepen my knowledge on Nexus. I don't love scaling frameworks, but you can't avoid the fact that there are some great ideas in SAFe and Nexus and LESS and all those other conceptual frameworks about how to do anything agile with big size teams, multidisciplinary teams, teams that have not 100% overlapping scope, all working on the same product increment. And so in order to do it, there's all of this complex information. I'm like, I almost did a Google search so that I could take a course. No. How can I learn up on Nexus as quickly as possible? And I thought, you know what, forget it. I'm going to do what I preach, which is go grab some fundamental concept and start working with it. And I know that some of it can't be templatized, so I won't be able to click and go. Some things I'm going to have to figure out and fumble through in order to get them right. And there are some things that I'm going to have to realize I haven't learned enough, so I'm going to have to go back, read a couple of things, and try to figure out. So I'm going to fall on my face a ton as I'm trying to implement some of these things, just as an experiment. So as a learning professional, Laurens, what's your take on practice, rehearse, do?
Ooh, well, the main thing is it needs to be a balance of all those things, right? So you need to both practice, you need to rehearse, you need to actually do the thing that you're practicing for. There is some knowledge and regular, normal learning involved, but the magic of learning is not in the learning itself, it's in the doing, in the actual practicing, applying what you've learned and accepting that you'll probably suck at it the first time round, and then continuing anyway, learning a little more, going through the frustration, and even not just expecting it, but accepting it, and then really, really sounding great. And we're getting some feedback here on my audio. Apparently, it's not too awesome. And let me double check here if I can do anything about that.
While you do that, let's fidget with what you need to fidget with. I like to hone in a little bit and say, what value can we give to the folks who are watching this today in terms of learning? I think that even if you say practice, rehearse, do, there's an inclination to say, all right, well, let's at least understand the totality of what we need to practice. So when you're thinking about a framework like Nexus, there are multiple practices, disciplines, and potential tools that you would need to ramp up on. I would suggest that you can't let that overwhelm you. Does that make sense? You can't say, all right, well, I won't be effective at any until I apply all. Pick a piece and focus. I think that's the number one tip that I can give you. So if you have something big that you have to learn, choose one area and focus there. It will become immediately apparent where the piece that you've chosen depends on another piece. So for example, in the Forge, we teach get visionary first. There's almost no way to teach just getting visionary without knowing a little bit about how to get focused, a little bit about how to get gritty. So the right lessons will come up at the right time. But if you feel like you have to teach a little bit of all of it before you can practice any of it, that's up here. What do you think?
Well, actually, I think that's what holds back most people, including me. When you get started, one of the most common things that we've been taught in school, and again, sorry if you can't hear me as clearly as you want to. It has something to do, I think, with the mic placement, and this is actually probably the mic from the phone again. Anyway, the main thing that people struggle with, and I struggle with, is you've been taught in a certain way to learn, and by always doing that, you'll essentially lock yourself up in your brain instead of in the experience of the thing that you want to be learning. That's just a long way to say, I agree with what you just said. It's very, very important to mix it up, but to actually focus more on the doing than on the theory and on the reading the best books and listening to the best podcasts about this.
Excellent point. So I don't know, how's the sound, guys? Just shoot us a note if you can hear Laurens a little bit better, and make sure that I sound okay as well, because I want to make sure you can hear all of this. But while we're waiting for that feedback, I have a question for you, Laurens. I want you to think about a time when you had to learn something strictly by doing, knowing that there's a ton of book knowledge available to you. You simply chose to dive in, bring the manual with you, and realize that, as soon as I need it, I'll find it, I'll research it, I'll learn what I need to, and then I'll get back to practicing and rehearsing. So I'd like to think about a time when you've done that in your recent past. While you're thinking about that, so apparently you're loud and clear. Okay. Thank you for that, guys. Here's some, let's start boiling down. I like to leave you with some tips. So number one tip is, of course, do, practice, rehearse rather than read, study, and postulate. The first real tip, though, was to choose a piece and follow it down. So I have a songwriting coach, instructor, whatever you want to call him. And his thing is, you're going to do it badly at first. So hanging off of tip number one, which is pick a piece and don't worry about how it snaps into the rest of the framework or picture, because you can't learn, practice, and do it all at once. Pick a piece, rehearse that. So what would that look like if you're trying to learn Nexus, for example? You're going to choose one principle. You're going to choose one practice, whatever it might be, and add it. And try it in the context of an entire sprint, or at least see if you can get through a single day with just that piece as an incremental improvement.
Actually, it makes a ton of sense, right? Because the thing that we're talking about, Agile, at least that I tend to talk about quite a lot, it's all about that, right? Take one thing you could improve, choose the thing you must improve most now, then go do it. Actually improve it, and don't be sidetracked by all the other stuff you might improve still, and then get really good at that, or at least as much better as you intended to. And then pick the next thing, improve that as well. And as you do that, you essentially laminate awesome all up until like really unimaginably awesome. And that can go way faster than you think, because people tend to underestimate what they can do in a short period of time if they do it like in small increments.
Isn't that true? It's about, I like the word you use, laminate. The word I always use is cement. So let's get a single practice into the bedrock so you no longer have to think about it. A new practice, when you're rehearsing a new skill, think about it. Remember the first time you drove a car. Everything is, whoa, from steering to braking to accelerating to shifting to checking your mirrors to using your turn signals and all the instruments and getting the radio just right. All of those things are holy crap skills the first time you do them, right? But the only way to get good at driving a car is to simply start driving it and focus on the most important thing first, which I would say when you first drive a car, it's got to be steering, with braking being a very close second. Focus on being excellent in those things and realize you'll eventually learn how to check your mirrors on a proper interval. You'll eventually get really good at shoulder checking. You'll eventually get really, really good at accelerating smoothly, stopping smoothly, fidgeting with the radio. For now, do all of it badly, but focus your efforts on getting good on that one thing because it's a survival skill in this case, right? Marianne says, I sound good too. Girl, listen, my gear is dope. So I better be sounding awesome. Anyway, thanks for that, Marianne.
She was mentioning that I sound like I'm sitting in the smallest room in the house. And I probably still am because I think it's a bi-directional mic time where even though I've hooked up all the good stuff, it's just picking up my not just the room. It's using, I think, the mic in the phone. So if you want to have awesome audio, watch on YouTube because there the audio will be way better. But I still haven't figured that one out yet. How to make that work. Anyway,
on YouTube, what I'm hearing, what I'm monitoring here, you sound great. All right. So tip number 1, pick one thing. Tip number 2, integrate that one thing into the rest of whatever it is you're trying to do. You're trying to drive a car better, great. If you're trying to have more confidence, great. Pick one aspect of confidence building and just integrate it. The rest of your stuff is going to suck, but if you try to improve and get excellent on everything at once during rehearsal, it won't work. Think about any other skill: playing guitar, playing piano, hitting a baseball, any other mechanical or mental skill that you've had to develop in your lifetime. If you don't focus on getting one thing excellent so that you can cement it and switch it over to the habitual part of your brain, you won't have any free space to learn new stuff. You're going to get frustrated. You're going to quit. So, Laurens, did you manage to think up or drum up an example from recent memory where you have had to blow up your learning game?
Well, it's not that recent, but when I got started with scaling Agile, I got Scrum down already, and then somebody asked me, of course, you know how to do this with like 600 people, right? Because apparently that's what they'd been sold. And right before I said, hell no, I have no idea how to do this with 600 people. I said, yeah, of course. And then I drove back home, and then I did the most logical thing at the time. I read the entire internet on scaling and bought the books and all that stuff. Whereas what I should have done, and actually I did, so the thing that worked was not that, even though it was helpful. The thing that really worked was calling a good friend and ask who had done that before and asking, so what tip there never fails to make things better? He told me, so when I got back a day later, it sounded as if I had a plan and some experience, even though I didn't. But the main tip was just do it, man. I mean, it's the same thing that you already know, but then with lots of teams instead of just one. And that triggered the just do it, man, was the advice that helped me. Of course, that client's probably not going to be really happy to hear that I really didn't know what I was doing either. But it worked because I got in there ready to learn, accepting the fact that I didn't know. And you can't study for it. You can't study for the actual doing. You can be inspired by it. You can be armed with some extra knowledge. But, well, as Marianne is fond of saying, it's all about the doing, right? So that is where the rubber meets the road.
Let's add a value point 3 then from what you just suggested, which is that I think clients don't value you for your knowledge. They value you for the results that you can bring. And the results that you can bring is directly tied to your willingness to say, I don't know how to do this, but I'm going to find a way or make a way. To my mind, that's the master skill. Because if you can find a way or make a way, it doesn't matter if your current context is Scrum or Nexus or Kanban, or let's say it gets replaced by a completely new framework tomorrow, which is thoroughly possible. Your find a way or make a way attitude is actually what's going to make you successful and marketable in that realm. Does that make sense?
I completely agree. And actually, it could be if you're all into lots of knowledge, which interestingly is actually sort of my thing. But I've had the weirdest compliment paid to me at some point in time when one of my clients actually introduced me to someone else as he is my walking encyclopedia. She meant that as a compliment, but I knew that it was a weird compliment because that just means whenever I want to know something, I'll ask him because he's read everything. But the real compliment is when they hire you to get something done, not just to know stuff.
Right.
So actually, that had all the alarm bells ringing in my head, and like, oh no! It's good that I know stuff, but you gotta be known for actually getting stuff done because that's what people really need.
That's right. You don't want to be known for being the guy with all the knowledge necessarily. You want to be known for the person who gets results. Absolutely true. So here's the next little value, hopefully bomb. I hate to use that word because it's overused, but here's the next little bit of wisdom that I'm hoping is useful to you. Do this for yourself so that you can teach others to do it, because the whole purpose of having this attitude and having this skill set of being able to do, rehearse, and practice is so that you can operationalize skills quickly, fearlessly, and without full and complete knowledge. It also, as we mentioned, irons out the paralysis, right? So the tip number 4 is do this so that you can be an exemplar to your team, because what you really want, guys, is to inspire your team to think the same way. If your teams think the same way, then they'll be willing to take on little nuggets of agile as they roll. So this week, all we're going to focus on is, do we have the backlog concept nailed down? Do we have the prioritized backlog concept down? If we can nail that, I don't care how badly we'll do retrospectives, and we'll do them and we'll fumble through them. But if we try to get all of these aspects perfect, and what I noticed, by the way, about Nexus is that the practice guidance is much bigger than Scrum. Scrum had that wonderful 3-5-3, now 3-4-3, which was so easy to take on, right? Because essentially there's 10 things or 11 things to learn. But I think with Nexus, it's much, much, much bigger. So if you try to get excellent at everything in that list, I think you're going to suffer. So tip number 4 is get good at doing this and make it a practice so you can show your teams how to do it, and then let them commit to a single improvement, adjustment, or new practice each week. Laurens, would you tend to agree or disagree?
I completely agree with that, especially the let's also prioritize the improvements that you're making. The whole how are we going to become an effective, high performant, agile team that gets after it and gets stuff done? There will always be one thing that is more important to get in place first before the other. So do apply the backlog concept to that as well immediately. Do not go full bore agile with everything, just trying to get everything in place in one go, reading the Scrum guide and thinking, tomorrow we're going to do this. It's probably not the best way. Just pick something that you think will help, implement it, then take the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. Maybe you'll end up doing something entirely different than Scrum, but that's exactly the point. You don't have to be doing Scrum to have an amazing team. Just take it as inspiration, weave in as much as is useful, weave stuff from other parts in, and I think that's how you should read as well. Read, be inspired, try, then really try, perfect, and then read some more, be inspired again, try, but always for the doing.
Right. And it has to be consistent and persistent. Because if you do this, if you learn one new thing this week, but then you stop the learning and the inspiring and the growing, you're going to backslide. So I can get my team to say, hey guys, we're going to get better at one thing at a time. We're going to reject the need or the feeling that we must get better at everything before we start. Research, learn, study, practice, discuss, meet, all that stuff. Plan, budget. And so if you take your foot off the gas, they're going to backslide into what they know. This is something as practitioners and leaders, you have to help your teams insist on. Like I said today, that my first instinct when I started saying I want to deepen my knowledge on Nexus is, okay, there's a lot here. Someone walk me through this. Someone simplify this for me. So I'll take an online course. Because that's going to forestall or delay my actual movement into the scaling world where I need some different skill sets. I want to mix it up a bit. It's going to delay that experiment by 2 weeks. And every week that you're unable to leverage new wisdom, new knowledge that's gleaned from experience is, to my mind, you can literally see money falling out of your project. Right? Because we could have solved this sooner. I could have stopped the inconsequential meetings sooner. I could have stopped the decision fatigue sooner. I could have stopped the fear of leaping sooner and saved my client time and money and frustration. So in your view, because I asked you as a learning professional what your thoughts on this were, as a practitioner of Agile, getting results for actual companies, moving the dial on customer outcomes, have you seen this work? Have you seen this stick?
The main tip here, or the learning, because what I've seen happen over and over again, being a trainer, I train a lot of people, and when they get back to work, they're usually inspired. They really try to get after it, but more often than not, they just fail to do it all, and then think that that's it, right? So we had the training. Apparently, we're not great at this, and they accept that. Whereas the whole point, and I've actually let go of the idea that a full day training is actually where the work happens. A full day training or 2 days of training is just injecting you with as much inspiration as I can muster. And then the real thing is when you get back to work and actually do that stuff, that's when the real learning happens. So I always tell all my students that that's the case and that they need to contact me with any questions that happen in real life, because that's the real learning that's happening. The thing that you get in a class is usually inspiration. It's not learning.
Good point. You know what I struggle with is lately I've been asked to do these 1 hour things for a conference or a seminar. We've all been to conferences, right? So we know what it's like. There's these ideas on the slide deck. We're furiously taking down notes because this will be the life-changing thing. And then we walk out of the room, and if the instructor were to go back and ask, if I were to go back and ask the teams I delivered this content to, how has this helped you? How have you implemented this? They'd be like, oh, well, I mean, we really haven't done anything differently, but we loved your presentation. It was so inspiring. People pay a lot of money to have guys like me come in and talk for an hour at a conference, and they don't do anything with it. See, that's the problem. There's too many conferences. There's too many speakers at each conference. There's too much demand for pulling down new sources
To be honest,
of
though,
inspiration.
there's a little thing to be said also for this to the speakers there. It's why I always have in all of my presentations, wherever I'm presenting, there's always the takeaway list that gets built up in the presentation, or at least presented, or I make sure to hammer home 3, maximum 5 things that I want people to actually do with what I'm presenting, to make sure that that's as easy as can be. And that's the main thing. Know what you want people to do when they listen to you. And if they're just there to be inspired, then okay, arguably that's also a good result. But in my mind, the better result is to actually change something behaviorally. Somebody was in your presentation and they went back to work and they did something different. So usually I just tie that into some kind of action, because if you do this and you report back to me what you've done and what the results are, then we'll just have a talk around that, or I give you something special or whatever. And interestingly, I've been doing that for ages. Not a lot of people actually do that. So I think that's exactly what the issue is.
There's the problem, is that we can give takeaway items, but there's still no guarantee. My experience, 90% of people who come to one of your seminars will not take the next step and implement what you've suggested, or if they implement it, they'll implement it incorrectly or with certain pieces missing that become a stumbling block to their success. And I know this because I go back to people all the time who have reached out to me and say, so inspiring, cannot wait to try this when I get back to the office tomorrow. And then when you send them an email saying, how did it go? They'll be like, well, we got busy last week, or there's always a reason why they haven't implemented it. So to my mind, I think that the future of these because now we're doing so much seminar stuff. Everything we do on a daily basis is online now. So people are experiencing that Zoom burnout, webinar burnout. I think the most important thing that we can do as speakers is to say, I'm going to inspire you today. and I'm going to give you one or two things that I need you to implement. And I want you to think about what's a practical use. So, for example, if you teach me a new technique on guitar, the first thing I want to know is give me a song where I can try it. Show me a song where that technique is useful, is part of the makeup of the song, and I'll start practicing. I'll practice slow, but I'm still going to play through the whole song because I need to see the technique in the context of the finished thing. So as speakers, the most important thing we can do is create even a simple online challenge, an online check-in or something to say, okay, here's what you learned. Now come to the website and I want you to show me. In thinking about, for example, how to improve a retrospective or how to simplify or shorten a retrospective, I gave you one piece of wisdom. How did you use that? How did you apply that? Did you use this in a song? Show me. Show me what the result was. And then let's do this again next week. So creating systems for people, simple systems for them to commit and play back results is going to help them make that cement or that laminate that we talked about. Okay, I tried it. I did it for 4 weeks. I'm ready to move on and improve my practice elsewhere. But if all you do is inspire, I don't know that we're serving people. Does that make sense? Which is why so much online education, the great online education, will always have a component of not just quizzing, but also implementing in practice and reporting as part of a community or group where we hold each other accountable for not taking our feet off the gas.
It's actually why I like to play games, and I'm not talking about the silly games like the Happy Fish or kind of the Energizer games.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the game that teaches you something in context. I'm not particularly fond of role playing, even though that is one version of a game like that. But a game that sucks you in a little bit more, right? And that will really, really help you learn the things in context, even though it's a training, and apply them in context, even though it's a training. And you'll get out of that having experienced the thing. Therefore, the first time you try it in real life is going to be that much better. And that's what I'm currently researching in. And of course, I'm doing that by actually trying on some games for size, because otherwise I can get mired in reading some more.
Right. Well, keep in mind in the Forge, this is how we learned everything we learned is we had weekly homework where it's like, go out and do, and then report back to your team. Tell your swim buddy each and every day, check in. Did you meet your commitment? And what was your experience? And do you need help? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then we're at the level now where you're teaching back on your experiences, right? So it is that learning has to be a progressive growth and accumulation of the knowledge gained through doing. So let's recap real quick. Number one, I probably won't remember these because I didn't write them down ahead of time. So help me. Anyone shout them out if you know them. Number one was pick a small increment. Pick one small element of change to focus on. Number two, follow that all the way down through a natural thread. So do your sprint the way you will have previously done your sprints. Run your teams the way you've always run them. Just add this one new piece of learning to practice. I forget what the third one was, but I remember that the fourth one was do this so that you can be an exemplar to your team of how to do it, because the gift is not me learning Nexus. It's me to give it back to my teams.
Talking about learning Nexus, though, this is an interesting thing to happen. The steward of the Nexus framework is currently on the call. It's Jesse Houwing. Welcome, Jesse. If you have anything in particular you'd like to know, just so you know, all about net, because we've been using that as an example, right? And the learning of a new framework, how to get after it, how to apply it. And the main thing there is the learning is in the application of it, not just in reading the guide and taking the class.
That's right.
As awesome as the class may be, but in actually working with multiple teams, doing Scrum well, using that framework.
Right.
That is where the value really is. And that's, of course, what you're currently doing.
Well, one of the problems is that modern education is based on industrial revolution style of education, in which we read about a skill, learn a skill, rehearse the skill, and then repeat the skill. Works great for mathematics. Here's how you problem solve. First, let x equal the blah, blah, blah of the blah, blah, blah. Let y equal the blah. We had a method that we learned and rehearsed and was imprinted because we needed people to run the machines. We needed to set you free in the world, and maybe you go into science or something where you advance your knowledge at a really academic level, but for the most part, the goal of education was to make people productive in the workplace. I'm not sure we should be learning that way anymore. I think learning should be a coevolution, side by side, new concepts, expanding concepts every week, more in the way that we teach something like guitar, with a weekly check-in, a half-hour lesson with a small increment of improvement that you apply to the whole of a song, which is the artistry. The artistry, that's the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sorry, I forget what number 3 is, but there were a couple good little tips in there. Anyone have any questions on the Instagram Live or on YouTube? If you have any questions, just shout them out. Is there anything that you'd like to know about how to explode your growth by learning incrementally with singular, single strand focus applied in context of the daily work, so that you can be an example for your team so they can do the same? Any questions or comments? If not, I think we'll sign off for today. Laurens, you can find us, as always, at badassagile.com. You can see us on Instagram right here at badassagile. Don't forget about the Facebook Badass Agile Listener Lounge, where you can come in and talk about these things and swear at each other in the comments. I want to thank you very much once again, Laurens, for joining me. Always a pleasure to have you on camera. We're going to see you next week at the same time, 11 a.m. EST every Wednesday. Until then, take care, my friends.
See you then.